Most taxpayers have no idea this even exists, but there's a real possibility the IRS may owe refunds on penalties and interest from the COVID years. And here's the catch. This is not automatic, and for many people, the deadline to protect your rights is July 10th of 2026. If you don't take action, you may never get that money back. Welcome back, everybody. Doug Burson here, CPA, and today I want to walk you through a major tax development that could affect millions of individuals and business owners. This centers around a court case called Kwong versus United States, and depending on how this ultimately plays out, it could open the door to refunds or reduction of IRS penalties and interest from the COVID disaster period. So let me simplify what's going on. There's a section of the tax law, Internal Revenue Code 7508A, that says when there's a federally declared disaster, the IRS must postpone certain filing and payment deadlines. In the Kwong case, the court took a very broad interpretation of that rule, and the court said that because COVID was a nationwide disaster, the postponement period actually ran from January 20th of 2020 through May 11th of 2023, plus 60 more days, which brings us to July 10th of 2023. Now, here's why that matters. Under the court's reasoning, returns and payments due during that entire window may not have been considered late until after July 10th of 2023. So why did this matter? Well, if this interpretation ultimately holds, there's a real argument that some late filing penalties, late payment penalties, some estimated tax penalties, and possibly certain interest charges may have been improperly assessed during that period. I got to be very clear on this because a lot of people are telling you this is guaranteed, and it's not true. I've got to be clear. This does not mean that everyone automatically gets a refund. This is a legal interpretation from only one court, and the IRS disagrees with that interpretation. In fact, the government has already filed an appeal, so this is an issue that's still being litigated. I believe that appeal was done around May 20th of this year, 26. So it's under appeal already. So who does this affect? Well, this isn't a small niche issue. This could affect individuals, small business owners, S corporations, partnerships, trusts and estates, and even people who may have had penalties on international filings. If you had any penalty or interest tied to tax filings or payments between 2020 and mid-23, you need to at least take a look at this. But there's a big problem. There's a real problem. This is what concerns me as a CPA. Even if you're eligible for a refund, the IRS will generally not issue it automatically, which means if you don't take action, and I mean soon, you could lose your right to that refund entirely. And that creates a gap between people who are well advised and people who simply don't even know this exists. Well, you say, Doug, what do we do? Well, what does action really look like? For many taxpayers, it means evaluating whether you need to file Form 843. And that form is a claim for refund and request for abatement. That's the IRS form to use to request refunds of penalties, removal of penalties, and in some cases, adjustments to interest, but not usually. Now, in situations like this where the law isn't fully settled, many practitioners are recommending what's called a protective refund claim, and that basically preserves your right while the courts sort all of this out. Because as I said, the IRS has already appealed this, so we don't know where it's going to go. And by the time we do, if you've waited to file, it's already too late. So don't ignore this protective refund claim. So when is the deadline? This is the part you can't ignore at all right now. For many taxpayers, that key date is July 10th of 2026. That's tied to the normal statute of limitation rules for refunds. If you miss that deadline, you may permanently lose the ability to claim a refund, even if the court ultimately rules in favor of taxpayers. So what do you need to do? Right now, you need to take a first step, and that is to pull up your IRS account transcripts. Look for penalties assessed, interest charges. Look at the dates from 2020 to 23. And you don't need to fully understand every line. You're just trying to determine whether this issue might apply to you. Now, there's a problem. Quite often on the IRS website, you can only go back 5 years, so you may not be able to get all of your transcripts. And if not, you may have to call in. So if not, you may actually have to call in the IRS directly, and good luck with that. Now, one more thing that's frustrating is Form 843 currently has to be filed on paper. So if you do decide you need to go forward with a claim, you're going to want good documentation, and you're going to need to make sure you get proof of mailing, because there's no simple electronic filing for this shit. Now, with all this being said, because of what this is and the amount of complications, if you're talking about a small penalty of 50 or $100 or maybe even $500, this may not be worth your time, because there's no guarantee, a lot of paperwork, a lot of work. If you get a professional involved, it's probably going to cost quite a bit of money for them to help you too. But if you got a large penalty, you definitely want to take a look at this. If you got a small one and you feel like taking a shot at filing the 843, great. But if it's a bigger penalty, I would make sure you reach out to a professional. So here's the bottom line. This is not guaranteed money, and it's not settled law. I know there's a lot of guys out there saying this is guaranteed, file it, you're going to get it. That's not necessarily the case, but it is a legitimate issue that could affect a large number of taxpayers. And those of you who watch me, I want you to know about this. The real risk isn't being wrong, it's doing nothing and losing your rights. If you think this may apply to you, review your situation. Talk with a qualified tax professional before the deadline. And if you want me to do a follow-up showing how to read your IRS transcript for this specifically, maybe drop a comment below and let me know. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.